the only place that's we had to call Rick ahead of time.
Go ahead. Who needs a list? Tony, what kind of list do you need?
All rise. First District Court of Appeal is now in session for the retirement of Judge Bradford Lee Thomas. All who have business before this court draw near, give attention, and you shall be heard. May God save the United States, the great state of Florida, this honorable court.
Thank you. You may be seated. Good afternoon and welcome to the First District Court of Appeal for this special session on the retirement of our good friend and colleague, Judge Bradford L. Thomas. We have a number of dignitaries with us here today, family and friends. We won't name everybody who is here, but we're honored to be with you. Thank you for coming. We especially want to welcome Judge Thomas's wife, Susan, and daughter, Anna. I wish to begin by recognizing Judge Bobby Long, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Folks, if you'll stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You can have a seat.
Thank you, Judge Long. It's now my great pleasure to welcome and recognize our first speaker by video. He served as the 8 years as the 43rd governor of Florida, Governor Jeb Bush. Governor Bush, welcome.
Thank you, Judge. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Fantastic. I'm so sorry I can't make it up to Tallahassee, but I'm down here in God's country working for a living, and everybody's dressed up in a suit. I stopped wearing suits other than weddings and funerals, and this is not a funeral nor a wedding. This is a time to celebrate a great public servant. I started working with Brad as a rookie governor. You know, when you get elected, you think you have everything figured out, and you get, like, the first week of the job, I get summoned to Miami in a federal court telling me that they were going to take over an entire state program. So I needed people around me that actually knew how government worked and had core principles that I shared to be effective. And Brad was one of those people. He was, we were so fortunate to have him serve as the public safety policy coordinator for most of my time as governor until I appointed him to this very court. As you all know, Brad is a principle-centered man, a person of deep faith, really focused on his family, and really, really, really smart. We had lots of times to discuss criminal justice issues, and normally Carlos will appreciate this, and Paul, when we were appointing judges, I would spend a lot of time talking to people in the court, people that wanted to be candidates to serve, as you all are doing right now. And I didn't have to do that with Brad, because I worked with him day in and day out. I knew his compass pointed north. He understood the role of the judiciary in our society, and I think he's made a really positive contribution in his service as a judge. And he certainly made a contribution as a public servant in the legislature and in the executive office of the governor. So, Susan, you're going to welcome Brad back a little bit more into your life, which is really cool. I know that Brad has he's about my age, so this is not retirement. It's not possible for someone with that energy and intellect to call it quits. Give me a call, Brad. I got a bunch of great ideas for you to continue to serve our great state. Thank you for allowing me to come via Zoom, and congratulations on an incredible career of public service.
Thank you, Governor Bush. It's now my pleasure to welcome our second speaker, who occupied this very chair as Chief Judge of the First DCA, former Chief Paul Hawks. Welcome back to the First DCA, Judge Hawks.
Notes somewhere. You know, it is truly an honor to be invited to speak at my friend's retirement ceremony. I can't believe that 20 years have passed since he was first appointed to the court. And realistically, when I look back at it, I've known him for longer than that. We worked together at the Florida House. We worked together for Governor Bush. And of course, we served together here on the court. I know that when I met him at the House, Danny Webster had just become Speaker. It was the first time Republicans had had the speakership in 122 years. We wanted to make an impact. We wanted to be different. We wanted to be responsive. And no better person than Brad to help us with that. Shortly after Dana became Speaker, or shortly before Dana became Speaker, I should say, the legislature had passed a gain time reform proposal. And the Supreme Court thought that the gain time reform proposal was violative of defendants' rights. And so the legislature wanted to do something because they thought the prison system was too much of a revolving door. And so they passed the reoffender statute. And Brad was appointed to the team of about 3 people that worked on the reoffender statute. And in fact, the max penalty for the offense that caused you to be a reoffender was Brad's idea. But Brad has always had lots of ideas. You know, he helped, he was the first one that I ever heard say, let's abolish the guidelines. Now, I was a prosecutor, and the guidelines were part of our life. I couldn't imagine not having the guidelines, but Brad could. He dual tracking. I never even thought that anything like that was possible, and of course, it was adopted for a while. Brad even did, at one point in time, he did an entire notebook of criminal justice ideas with a white paper and the proposed legislation for his committee chair to look at, or for other members to adopt as legislation that they might want to do. So there's 2 things about Brad. One, he's incredibly focused and energetic, and he loves the law. But not everything that he has proposed related to criminal justice issues per se. Brad suggested that the Florida Highway Patrol should be abolished because it's merely a subsidy to local government when he was working for Governor Bush. He proposed a criminal court of appeal. He thought that maybe 5 justices ought to be required to reverse a statute as unconstitutional, or to find a statute unconstitutional. He loves the law, but he's not even limited in legal issues in his thoughts. Vatican II, daylight savings time, the high cost of college, and the Latin Mass. One time Brad invited me to lunch, and I was hesitant, didn't know if I had time, and he texted me back and he said, Jimmy, because the lunch was with Judge Hankinson, Jimmy really wants you to come because he doesn't want to talk about the Latin Mass. And in some respects, you might say that Brad is a little bit clairvoyant. In 2012, he told me that there were 12 words that someone could say to win the presidency. Bring the troops home, bring the jobs home, and stop illegal immigration. You know, I never thought about those kinds of things, but then 4 years later, of course, Donald Trump kind of ran on that platform. And Brad is always fully engaged. We volunteered to go down to help out the Second Circuit do some trials. I'm in the courtroom with Brad. There's a bailiff there. The bailiff runs over, wants to greet Brad, say hello to Brad, because he remembers when Brad was a prosecutor. He said, I used to love to watch you in trial. You were so intense. You could almost see your neck bulge with your heartbeat when you were prosecuting. And of course, we heard from Governor Bush, but every morning during the session, Governor Bush would have a meeting at 7:30, and he would invite his policy people. And so, and Governor Bush was a very horizontal manager, great guy to work for, but Brad is going on about what's happening in the criminal justice world, what he thinks ought to be happening in the criminal justice world, and Brad tells the story that Governor Bush looked at him and said, Brad, what about my agenda? But Brad assured him that starting that day, he would work on his agenda. So in 2004, Judge Booth was getting ready to retire from the court. I emailed Brad and I said, get your J&C application ready. You ought to apply for the court. And of course, he did apply and did get appointed. And so when we learned of his appointment, there was a DCA conference in Ponte Vedra, not a terrible drive. I asked Judge Allen, who was the conference president that year, if he thought it would be okay if Brad came over and met people. He thought it would be a great idea. I called up Brad. I said, hey, Brad, why don't you come on over, meet the folks? He said, no, I think it might be inappropriate. And I thought, gee, what happened to this guy who's fully engaged and doesn't back off? Maybe he needs to be in a position for a while before he actually decides to get fully engaged. Well, I was wrong. I get on the court. Well, he gets on the court. I had been on the court for 2 years at that point in time. And within the first 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, he files a motion to go en banc. Pretty bold. But what made it bolder was he wasn't on the panel. And even more so, the panel decision was unanimous. And the court did go en banc, but we're going to hear later about how many cases Brad has sat on and how many opinions he's written and things like that. We probably won't hear the exact number of how many en banc motions he's filed. I would venture to say it's more than any other judge in the history of this court and probably the history of any of the DCAs. In fact, Judge Roberts told a joke one time, well, maybe it wasn't a joke, that January 1st of every year, Brad is given 4 tokens, and each token is good for 1 en banc motion. The problem is that by the end of January, Brad has run out of tokens and needs to deficit spend. But Brad remains fully engaged. Just last week, we were at lunch, and he was telling me he had to make sure that his current docket was up to date, so that the judge who took his place wouldn't be behind. 20 years on the court, and he's still worried to make sure that his docket is up to date for his successor. So I want to wish you and Susan Godspeed as you move to St. Augustine and have your life over there. I want to thank you for your contributions. I think because of your contributions, Florida's a better place. I think Florida's a safer place. Selfishly speaking, I'm going to miss you. It was a regular kind of lunch thing, spur of the moment. I could text lunch and hear about the Latin Mass. But thank you mostly, Brad, for your friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Hawks. It's now my pleasure to recognize our third speaker, who has served on this court since 2009, including as Chief Judge from 2021 to 2023, Judge Lori Rowe.
Thank you, Chief. It's my great honor to share a few words today about our colleague, Judge Brad Thomas, to discuss his place in the court's history, his contributions to the law, and what he means to his mentees and colleagues. I first met Brad in around about 2002. I was working on a political campaign for Attorney General, and our mutual friend Pete Antonacci said that I should meet with Brad Thomas to talk about capital punishment because no one knew more about it than him. From his time as a prosecutor, serving in the governor's office, and serving in the legislature, Brad indeed knew the subject well and advised me well. Our paths did not cross again for about 7 years. He and then Chief Judge Hawks invited me to lunch. I was 38 years old and about 7 years pregnant, 7 months. It felt like it did feel like 7 years. It was an August baby. And they urged me to apply to the court. I wasn't sure that the timing was right or that I was ready, but their enthusiasm for the work they were doing at the court and their vision for improvements in the administration of justice really captured my attention and spurred me to apply. I'm so very glad I did because I gained a mentor and a friend for the next 15 and a half years in Judge Thomas. So let's turn a little bit to his beginnings. The call for nominations for his position occurred in September of 2024. 30 attorneys and judges applied. The interviews were held in October of 2004, and there were 6 nominees, including future judges Scott Makar and Judge Nikki Clark. Of course, we know that Governor Bush selected Judge Thomas. He was appointed 2 days before Christmas for a term to begin in January of 2005. Judge Thomas is the 40th judge appointed to the First District Court of Appeal, and the seat he occupies was established in 1978 by the Florida legislature, and only 2 people have sat in that seat, Judge Ann Booth, who sat in that seat for 27 years, and Judge Thomas, who has been here for 20. I know we have a few members of the Judicial Nominating Commission here today. I hope you'll find a colleague who will serve just as long and well as the 2 of these judges. When he was first appointed, he was interviewed by the Florida Appellate Practice Section, and he quoted the Latin motto on our seal and the seal of the Florida Supreme Court, "Sat cito si recte," soon enough if done rightly. And he described his challenge as a judge would be to balance his desire to reach the right decision in a thoughtful analysis with the need for appropriate promptness for the litigants and attorneys. Judge Thomas, you have met that challenge well for 20 years. Of course, he wasted no time writing his first decision. His first published opinion was within 4 weeks of joining the court. Judge Polston, you were on that panel with Judge Van Norwick and Judge Thomas. He has decided nearly 15,000 cases while serving as a judge on this court. 6,565 as primary judge, with 1,369 written opinions, 524 of them authored. He's written 68 dissenting opinions. That number surprised me a little bit. As many times as we've disagreed over the years, though, it did occur to me there are two key characteristics about Judge Thomas. He is both persuasive and persuadable. I can count many times where he was zealously advocating for his argument and view of the case, and he persuaded me. And I can think of a couple times where I persuaded him. But he was always willing to listen, and I really credit those conversations with making me a better judge and many of us. Another important part of his legacy are his 82 concurring opinions. Judge Thomas has been very bold in looking for improvements in the law and urging courts to revisit prior precedents. One example of that was the 2022 Lanehart decision, where he called into question 2 Superior Court rulings on capital punishment. Those decisions prohibited the imposition of the death penalty on defendants who had committed capital sexual battery. The legislature responded the next year, making clear that should those decisions be revisited by the higher courts, that penalty would be available in Florida. He has made a lasting impression through his thoughtful and reasoned decisions, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later. He's also been a leader on this court. His colleagues elected him to serve as chief judge from 2017 to 2019, as in all things he was bold and swift to act. He was always willing to reconsider court practices and policies and always looking to improve the way we do our work. During his term, the people of Florida amended the Florida Constitution to include Marsy's Law to give greater voice and rights to victims. Chief Judge Thomas was clear that we needed to meet the objectives set out in the constitutional amendment to timely dispose of these cases, and he also encouraged us to write more in post-conviction appeals, being mindful of the impact on state and federal habeas proceedings. And that relates to the other chief hallmark of his term as chief. From the beginning of his time on this court, he has been adamant about the need to explain our decisions to the parties, to the public, to the bench and the bar, so that they understand what it is that we're doing. 2 things he did as chief were internally to have a monthly report of every decision written by every judge, so we were accountable to one another. And he also began publishing our opinion statistics on the website so that the public understood what we were doing and how often we were doing it. There's no doubt in my mind that we write more as a court, and we look for opportunities to write more because of Chief Judge Thomas and our colleague, Brad Thomas. Judge Thomas has also been an outstanding mentor. He has been a mentor to over 20 law clerks, and I'm happy to say 15 of them are here with us today, and many other legal interns. He is a respected and cherished colleague, and he has served with 32 of the 58 judges who've served on the First District Court of Appeal. Those who've served with him know him to be a man of habit and a man of faith. Walking with his dog on the local greenways, he's a man who appreciates the beauty of nature and remains in awe of God's creation. If you're fortunate enough to be on one of his group texts, you will have seen photos of Miccosukee Greenway, of sunsets, and more recently views of his beautiful home with Susan in Jacksonville. Another of his habits is reading. He is a voracious reader, not just of court opinions and legal authorities, but history, religion, philosophy, politics. He consumes books and Substacks and accounts on X. He's passionate on his opinions on many subjects, and he's always eager to discuss and debate. Another of his habits is writing, and not just court opinions. He's written a screenplay before he became a judge, and in 2020 he published a book, Paolo the Brown Pelican. I expect his offerings on Amazon to expand even more in the coming years. But his best-known habit on the court is walking around the courthouse to spend time with his colleagues. Other than Judge Roberts, no one else is more likely to enter your chambers to talk about a case to ask about your family, to talk about life. Judge Thomas will share stories from his time as a prosecutor with his dear mentor, Ray Markey, with his photographic memory of cases really unparalleled. He lights up when he's speaking of Susan and Anna and the Florida Gators and of family and friends. He has been my neighbor on the court since 2010 on the 3rd floor east. Our hallways are constantly abuzz with chatter with clerks and colleagues, lively discussions about cases in life. My hallmates, Judge Nordby and Judge Long, will attest to that, as will former colleagues, Judges Weatherall and Wolf. Lots and lots of traffic on the 3rd floor. Judge Thomas, your colleagues in the court will miss the sound of your voice and your visits to our office, but we are spurred on by your good example, and we will endeavor to keep the conversation going, especially on 3rd floor east. In closing, I'd like to share a quote from Cicero that reflects the kind of judge and the kind of man we know in Judge Thomas. Justitia est habitus animi communi utilitate, conservata suam quique tribunes dignitatem. And I'll translate that. Virtue is a habit of the mind in tune with nature, and justice is a habit of the soul which accords a fitting dignity to everything. Judge Thomas, your decades of public service and 20 years on this court are a testament to the habit of the soul that Cicero described. Thank you for your outstanding service to the people of Florida and your many contributions to the law. We will miss you.
Thank you, Judge Rowe. Before I call on our next speaker, it's my honor to call on Judge Rachel Nordby for a special presentation on behalf of Judge Thomas's former law clerks.
Thank you, Chief. We have now reached the surprise portion of the program, and I have just 2 brief presentations to make. Judge Thomas, in October 2007, you interviewed a very nervous 3L from FSU, and you took a chance on her as your law clerk. Thank you for giving me my first job out of law school. But today, I'm not the only one who wants to thank you. At this time, I ask all of Judge Thomas's current and former law clerks and interns who are present to please stand and remain standing. So good to see you. Judge Thomas, it is a true honor for us to celebrate your time on the bench. Collectively, we wish you the very best as you embark on a well-deserved retirement. You have been a role model on and off the bench, a mentor who has guided us with wisdom, integrity, and an unwavering dedication to the law. And of course, we all know your passion for writing opinions. Judge Rowe's statistics confirm you are a prolific opinion writer. Marshall Taylor, would you help us reveal the surprise? Judge Thomas, as a small token of our appreciation, we are pleased to present you with a bound collection of your authored opinions. Wow. Every majority, concurring, and dissenting opinion from your time here at the First, totaling 5 volumes. May these books serve as a reminder of the lasting impact you've had on your clerks and on the law itself. We also have a gift basket for you, Judge Thomas, with some other small gifts, but we'll present that to you as a group after the ceremony today. Congratulations, Judge Thomas. Enjoy this next chapter.
Thank you.
So I will now take off my former law clerk hat and put on my judge hat. Judge Thomas, you mean so much to your colleagues here at the First. Over the past few weeks, we've wrestled with a complex mix of emotions. A dear friend and colleague is leaving the bench, and this court simply won't be the same without you. The halls will feel different without you strolling through, stopping by to discuss life, law, and everything in between. One thing we all agree on is your deep love for this court. When I clerked for you, we were downtown at what is now the FSU Law Advocacy Center. All of your colleagues know of the time, effort, and energy you poured into the planning and building of the beautiful courthouse we all sit in today. Generations of First DCA judges, clerks, and court personnel will walk these halls and experience the privilege of working in the best courthouse in the state because of you, Judge Thomas. So it is only fitting that your colleagues wanted to gift you a custom-framed image of this courthouse, but not just any image. Marshall Taylor, would you please deliver our gift to Judge Thomas? So Marshall Taylor helped us pull the original blueprints, and Chris Corzine captured a digital image of one of those blueprints. Framed right below the blueprint is a photograph of the courthouse right after its completion, and at the top we've included the court's letterhead seal, and beneath it the Latin quote from Cicero that Judge Rowe just read us all. This is a small token of the deep appreciation and admiration we all feel today. Judge Thomas, thank you for these past 20 years. Your colleagues wish you a fulfilling and active retirement full of new opportunities to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Norby, and thanks to all the law clerks out there, too. What a wonderful gift. It's now my pleasure to welcome our fourth speaker, who has served on this court since 2019, Judge Adam Tannenbaum.
Judge Thomas, do you need to use the restroom first? Because this is going to be a while. Inside joke from my investiture. Judge Brad Thomas, brother, friend, and judicial colleague. So, all right, I've broken this into 3 sections. Things about Judge Thomas that make me laugh. Movies that we've discussed over and over and over again. He loves to quote movies, and if that's not enough, he will show you the YouTube clip, and then you can watch that to your heart's content over and over again as well. No Country for Old Men, True Grit, Raising Arizona, Blade Runner in particular. That's the spirit. Stripes, just to name a few. His offers to treat us all to chips at the El Jalisco. By the way, the chips are free. You have to pay for your own guac, except on special occasions. The El Jalisco donkey story, you can ask him about that later if you like. Old war stories repeatedly. His fights against the Novus Ordo. Repeated dissertations on the Battle of Lepanto. That's available on Wikipedia, and a book I'm sure that'll be published soon from Judge Thomas. Screeds against anything that catches his fancy. Complaints about the length of my investiture, as I just mentioned. Winter dips in the pool and fire pits, and pictures of both. That just, all those things make me laugh. Things about Judge Thomas that I will miss. Bradham, because without him, I'll just be dumb or More on that in a moment. Letters of resignation. There are many of them. We were going to have these bound, but it was going to be too many volumes to publish. Bourbon old fashions on the veranda. Multiple calls throughout the day about whatever the hot thing is at the moment. Motions for rehearing en banc. Calls for a ride because of yet another issue with his car. Complaints about judicial compensation. Trips to the Capitol. Lunches at the club, the El, Pedro's, La Fiesta, and a number of other restaurants. Fish on Fridays. Quips like substantive process, if that is even a thing, really happened, right up there on the bench. And put the Constitution aside for a moment. And then, of course, random questions about Bostock that may or may not have anything to do with the actual case being argued, leaving lawyers a little bit speechless. Or arguments when Brad is on a mission. Just being around Brad when he is on yet another mission, whatever that might be. And finally, things about Judge Brad Thomas that I admire. First is compassion. Now, according to Merriam-Webster Online, last check this afternoon, another inside joke, compassion comes from the Latin roots meaning to bear or suffer with. You don't have to talk with Brad very long to realize how deeply he feels the suffering of every murder victim and family, the suffering of every friend, and his reflexive drive to provide comfort and aid, be it in a small gesture or a kind word or the offer of his time, treasure, and talent. His passion, which has the same root but a different meaning, once again, according to Merriam-Webster.com, last checked, just after the previous check that I just did, passion means devotion to some activity, object, or concept. Get this man started on a mission or a cause, and there is no stopping him. And he will not stop. He's the id on this court, the mover, the spirit that perhaps can be argued with, but can't be ignored. Next, his loyalty. There is no truer friend than Brad Thomas. I've not had many close friends in my life, but Brad taught me what real friendship means. Some details are private and personal to us, but I can tell you this: in your darkest hour, Brad is there, no questions asked, overflowing with his generosity. He will drive anywhere, offer his home, provide his resources, his time, all for his friend. To have Brad as your friend or colleague, wow, what a gift that has been bestowed on you. And finally, his redemption story. Sure, we all have heard about Brad's conversion story regarding Catholic Christianity, maybe more than once. While a formative inflection point in his life, it remains but a clue about Brad's personality generally and his approach to judging for over 20 years. This is what I mean by this. To the end, Brad has been unafraid to question premises on which he has relied, and he's been unafraid to change course if he becomes convinced that the prior course, even one that he has published on for years, was an error. He's never been afraid to admit he was wrong, and he's never been afraid of new ideas or new approaches. He has the courage, even in the later years of his judicial career, to question and change course, all for the sake of meeting up with his ideal of being a good man, a good colleague, and a good judge. In the over 5 years I've known him as a judicial colleague, not once did I hear him utter a concern about what people might say about him if he decides a case a certain way. Never has he played to type. Always has he sought the answer that is correct based on the law when it comes to judging. And he's always been open to a better way to be a colleague and a friend. We've heard the jokes, first about Browlin, then about Bradham, but these do not give Brad his due. Even as a seasoned judge, Brad was open to newcomers and new ideas. He's always been open to questioning of the existing order, except for Catholic Christianity order, but the existing order at the court, all in the name of our collectively getting things right. This shows an intestinal fortitude or a quiet courage to explore and think and challenge in the name of law and justice without concern for personal consequences. There is no better example that I can think of what it means to be a lawyer and a judge. Deo gratias, and I apologize for the Latin. Thanks be to God for the privilege I have had to know Bradford L. Brad Thomas as a brother, a friend, and a judicial colleague. Thank you, and good luck, and congratulations.
Thank you, Judge Tannenbaum. It's now my great honor to welcome our final speaker, the 57th Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, Carlos Muniz. Welcome to the first DCA.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. That was a beautiful speech, Adam. There's few things that are as gratifying in life as to hear other people talk about someone who you really care about and love. And I didn't think I would be emotional here, but the speeches have been so kind. You know, Brad's one of a kind, and I think that we've heard today, and some of the things I wanted to say, Adam beat me to the punch, but he's just an incredible person, and I'm glad that his colleagues appreciate that. This is kind of a full circle moment for me. Brad and I worked together for Governor Bush, and I still remember when he was going through the process of becoming a judge. A lot's happened in both of our lives since then, and a lot's changed in the judiciary, the public life of our state. I'm really proud of you, Brad, for serving with distinction on this court for 20 years. I think the timing of your retirement is interesting. The border is secure, tariffs are high. New York Times v. Sullivan is teetering. Automatic death penalty statutes are back in vogue. And people everywhere are talking about impeaching judges. So I view this somewhat as kind of a declaration of victory on your part. So I wanted to thank you, though, in my official role for the service that you've given to the judiciary and to the state. But really, it's more important to me that I'm here in my capacity as Brad's friend. And I just wanted to talk about the two things about Brad that I appreciate the most, and it echoes a lot of what Adam said. The first is just to acknowledge Brad's capacity to form so many deep and lasting friendships. He loves his friends. He's as good a friend as anyone could have. I've benefited from that. I see that others have too. When I hear Brad talk about his closest friends, I'm just always kind of overwhelmed by how much he cares about them. I think about Ray Markey, Pete, Jimmy, his friend from high school, Paul. It's almost a reverence that he has for his friends and how much he loves his family, Susan and Anna. Part of the way that Brad shows how much he loves his friends is that he's willing to tell them things that they don't necessarily want to hear, and he'll do it with great vigor. Every Protestant friend of Brad's knows what I'm talking about. Ricky, the fact that I never tried to make you Catholic doesn't mean I don't love you. But Brad, the reason why Brad has all these discussions is because he cares about his friends, and he wants to, by hook or by crook, persuade them of what he thinks is true. And if it makes anyone feel any better, we Catholics are not immune from this. He's told me many times that I need to apologize for acknowledging the post-Vatican II Catholic Church. And so anyone who's been on the receiving end of one of Brad's conversations about religion, you're not alone, whether you're Catholic or not. And the second thing about Brad that I always think about is just his passion. It was kind of funny when Governor Bush said that he would be calling Brad with ideas, because the first thing I thought was the governor won't need to wait. He'll hear ideas from Brad. And I'm sure you've heard the stories. Brad has shared his ideas with the governor, even from before he was governor. And I think, as Paul was saying, there's no shortage of things that Brad has thought about and cared about and had ideas about. Professionally, the thing that I'll associate most with Brad is his insistence on justice for crime victims and for the larger society. As a consumer of Brad's judicial writing, and I think it's amazing and awesome that you guys gave him those bound volumes, because partly because it's great to memorialize his great work, and also just because I know how proud you are, Brad, about the writing and making that a key part of the job. But as a consumer of his writing, I'll think of him mostly as someone who stays kind of within the boundaries of modern judicial conservative, that approach to law, but that he'll, sneak in older concepts like natural justice, a Thomistic understanding of the law, things like human decency, civilized norms. So, Brad, I just want you to know we know what you're doing with that stuff, and we appreciate it. But Brad's passion, it's not just about work. As Adam was saying, it's everything from, Lepanto movies, judicial pay, the circuits, how many circuits we have in Florida. It goes on and on. There's nothing more exciting than getting, texts from Brad about, have you read this book? Have you read this article? Have you thought about this person? And, that enthusiasm and that passion that you have is infectious. And, I know that you've got a lot left and you're still going to be involved. And I look forward to kind of seeing what you're passionate about now that you'll have, more time to spend with your family and think about other stuff and, be more engaged than you are able to be as a judge. So I'll just finish by saying how grateful I am for Brad and for his friendship. He's truly one of a kind, and I know that the state of Florida is a much better place because of your service. So thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I now wish to make a presentation recognizing Judge Thomas's 20 years of service at the court. In this court's quest to faithfully apply the law and do justice, our court has been particularly blessed, as we've heard, to have Judge Brad Thomas on it, who personifies the model of a hardworking, independent-minded jurist. For the last 20 years, litigants before our court and all of us could count on Judge Thomas to throw himself hard into his cases, always ready to consider the arguments closely, to decide the issues promptly, and to stand firm on his convictions under the law. Personally, too, it's always been a privilege for me to be on a panel with Judge Thomas, not only because he's seen a lot of cases and knows a lot of law, but also because I knew that my own views were going to be tested, they were going to be sharpened, and we did give each other plenty of opportunity to dissent through the years, but that was good. That's our system, and that's the way it works. I also appreciated, much like the others have already spoken of, Judge Thomas's friendship. He, more than anybody else, was a regular visitor at my office, in my office during my 12 years here on the court, coming by to talk through cases, talk about life, talk about the issues, the movies, just as you've heard. He was a committed friend and a colleague, and I'm going to miss that. Now, in celebration of Judge Thomas's 20 extraordinary years of service on this court, and with the farewell good wishes of everyone here at the First DCA, I'm honored to present Judge Thomas with a specially engraved clock expressing thanks for his 20 years of dedicated service on the court. I now call on Judge Thomas for his response.
Thank you, Chief Judge. I'm very touched and honored. I especially appreciate my sister and brother-in-law being here, my family, Tanya, Linda, of course, my dear wife, Susan, and Anna, sitting in the place of honor. But I especially appreciate everyone who's taken the time to come here today. My former colleagues, Mr. Meggs, who put up with me. I see Mr. Campbell's here. I appreciate him being here. I appreciate all the contributions. Mr. Kerwin, longtime U.S. Attorney. There are folks that can't be here today that we talked about. Pete Antonacci, Judge James Hankinson, Jack Pottinger, of course, Ray Markey. I hope one day we'll have a courtroom here named after him. I think he did about 1,000 appeals in this court. I guess everything I learned about the law started with Ray Markey. And when I interviewed with him those many years ago, I remember he would spout case names and know the cases from inside out without ever looking at a book. And I thought, this guy's a genius. And he was. He passed away 19 years ago, but I wouldn't be here if I hadn't met Ray Markey. And of course, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't met Governor Jeb Bush. With all due respect to all the governors of Florida since then, he's my favorite for a lot of reasons. I met Governor Bush in 1994, actually December 93, when I called his campaign manager and said, if Mr. Bush would like to talk about capital punishment and the legal issues involved, I'd be willing to talk to him. I was an assistant state attorney on a modest salary, and I never expected in a million years, a few days later, he would call and want to talk about what those issues were. And he was just an amazing governor because he was so devoted to the people of the state of Florida. I want to thank my parents, who I learned the love of reading from, my dad, Ben, on the Thomas side, my mom, Faye, on my mother's side, the Peacock side. They gave me everything I have in terms of my mind, my love of reading. I'll never have my dad's work ethic, but I'm trying. And he loved people too. He died a long time ago, but he taught me a lot in his short life. I want to particularly thank my colleagues, of course. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to thank my speakers. It means a lot to me, all of you, for all of your kind words. I've talked about Governor Bush, who I could talk about all day, but I won't. But thank you, Governor Bush. Judge Hawks, I wouldn't be here if you hadn't sent me that email and said, get to work and file in that application. And you and I have worked through a lot of issues and spent so much time together. It's really Judge Hawks that deserves the credit for this courthouse. He looked over every detail. He worked so hard on this courthouse, which 14 years later is as beautiful as the day we walked in. And what's amazing about this courthouse is the multi-purpose room that is now used by state agencies, state employees, and they have a place to meet, discuss the law, discuss other related issues. It's a place where state employees and legal groups, by the way, I see Larry here, I want to thank him for coming over, that ends of court can meet here, and it's just an outstanding facility. When we were working on the facility, I remember a person telling me when I was on the committee, something we were talking about hot water in the bathrooms, and he said, well, state employees aren't allowed to have hot water in the bathroom. And I said, well, that's going to change right now. And it did. And I'm so proud of this courthouse and the work that's gone into it. Of course, everybody that works in it, obviously. But I hope one day Judge Hawks' courthouse will be named after you, because it's a fitting honor for what you did. When you look at the historical images around, I hope you get a chance to do that. Paul even wrote the captions under the pictures. He was devoted to every single detail. But also Judge Hawks has made amazing contributions to the state of Florida, both on the Constitutional Revision Commission, as a member of the legislature and a judge. And he's a dear friend that I'm going to miss very much. Judge Rowe, you and I have spent so much time together. Judge Rowe is an amazing person. She is so devoted to this court, to the history of the court. She is such a diligent, conscientious, intelligent judge. Even when I disagreed with her, she didn't hold it against me, even when I got too passionate about my views. And I'm grateful for that, because a lesser person would have maybe kicked me out of your office. So I'm grateful for that. I do want to clarify one thing Judge Hawks mentioned. the idea I presented to Governor Bush on the budget for the Florida Highway Patrol was not because I got a ticket. It was a funding issue, moving funds around, which we worked on hard at the Office of Policy and Budget. You know, there's a line from a famous movie, and it was actually said by Lou Gehrig when he resigned and retired from the Yankees, and he said, "I'm the luckiest man alive." And I kind of know that feeling right now, because the opportunities I've had to work as a prosecutor for Mr. Meggs, to work in criminal appeals for the Attorney General, to work for the Department of Environmental Protection, but to work for the legislature, for Governor Bush, and to be on this court with the colleagues I've served with, both present and past. Thank you all for being here, Judge Kahn, Judge Benton, Judge Wolf, Judge Windsor, Judge Wetherell. I'm grateful to you all for coming here because these are in my humble opinion, the best judges in the state of Florida, if not the United States. This court is particularly blessed because we're in the Capitol, which I did recommend to Senator Chris to move to St. Augustine, where I'm moving. That's a story for another day. But this court is at the intersection of law and politics. And, you know, it seems nowadays politics sort of has a dirty connotation in society, but it shouldn't, because really what it's about is justice. And when the legislature passes laws, those laws deserve respect. They certainly deserve to be read before we make a decision. They certainly deserve respect in terms of acknowledging that they're the people's elected representatives. And if their statutes, if their laws are within the bounds of the Constitution, then they must be respected. And I think this court has done a spectacular job doing that, especially over the last 20 years. But before that, too. One thing I've always admired, about Justice Clarence Thomas, when I read his book, My Grandfather's Son, was that he eschewed ideological labels. I would say what I've tried to do over the years is do the same. The dominant judicial philosophy right now in the United States, thanks to Justice Scalia, who made a magnificent contribution to the law, is textualism. But I would say I will say better. I'm not going to say what I say is better than Justice Scalia. But I would say a more comprehensive term might be contextualism and common sense. And that's something that I didn't learn right away being a judge. I made mistakes. And one of the disadvantages of serving for a length of time is you look back and you see, well, that decision was correct, but perhaps that decision was not correct. And I want to thank Judge Tannenbaum in particular, and others, Judge Windsor, that for bringing ideas and context to me that helped me, I hope, become a better judge. I guess history will determine that. I do intend to reproduce these books. They'll be on sale at Amazon. Just kidding. Just kidding. So that's contrary to the judicial ethics. It's not going to be on Amazon. I appreciate Judge Rowe commenting and Chief Justice Muniz on some of the things I've worked on. I would encourage my colleagues to understand that what you write makes a big difference. And when you write your own opinion, whether it's concurring or dissenting, if you have the law in your sights and you have a good idea, people read and they will listen and they will make a difference. I appreciate Chief Justice Muniz. I wouldn't be here without his help. More importantly, I wouldn't be a Catholic without his guidance. And for that, that's a gift that can never be repaid. That's a gift that you hold on to for the rest of your life. Now, about the Latin Mass. I thank you for being here, Chief Justice Muniz. I remember those days in the governor's office talking about St. Thomas More. I walked into his office, and I think you had a poster of that book, or the book, and I said, oh, I just read that. And a friendship started that day that has never ended. Through ups and downs, ins and outs, and the Florida Supreme Court is fortunate to have you as Chief Justice. I can't think of a more dedicated, more intelligent person than Carlos Muniz, and I'm going to miss being in the same town with you. This is goodbye, but it's not farewell. I hope to see everybody either in St. Augustine or at some events. I want to thank, again, my sister and brother-in-law for being here. I want to thank all my family for coming. I want to thank Mike McCarron. I called Mike in my office one day when I was working for Governor Bush. He was the lobbyist for the Catholic bishops at the time. And we did not agree about capital punishment. He was often lobbying for different ideas to limit it in accordance with the directions of his bosses, who were wrong, but that's okay. So one day I called Mike and I said, can you come to my office, please? And he came to my office and I closed the door, and I think he thought, okay, the governor's going to bring the hammer down on me. And I said, Mike, I want to convert. And he just about fell out of the chair, and that was a scary time. I thought we were going to have to bring in the EMTs. But Mike, thank you. I thank Bob Woodward for being here. Bob is somebody I've known for many, many years. And I know I'm forgetting to thank some people. I thank Judge Webster for being here. I thank Olga. I thank Helen Irvin. Helen Irvin has a special place in our hearts because she worked for Children's Family Services. And that's the entity that worked with us on adopting Anna. And we wouldn't be here with a family if it weren't for Helen. My life has been made so much richer because of Anna. My wife of 4 decades plus, who's I know somewhat has somewhat conflicting ideas about retirement, but I know that it's going to be a wonderful adventure. And Susan, I wouldn't be the man I am. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for you and what we've experienced in our marriage together. Johnny, thank you for coming. Allison Hankinson, thank you for being here. Judge James Hankinson, I forgot to mention, was such an inspiration to me. I think, in fact, I suggested to the Chief Justice that there be an award named after Judge Hankinson. I don't know of a more dedicated circuit judge, a more dedicated public servant than James Hankinson. I hate to admit it, but he would sometimes say, have you read this case from the 3rd DCA? And I had to bluff and pretend I had read it because I couldn't let Jimmy down and think I hadn't read it. But between him and Peter Antonacci, who I call the greatest unelected public servant in Florida's history, Phil, thank you for being here. Owen, thank you for being here. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart to my colleagues and to everybody here today, God bless you and thank you. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Judge Norby. Thank you very much.
All right, this brings us to about the conclusion. Our thanks to everybody for attending today. Before we adjourn, I ask that family members, former clerks, and externs remain in the courtroom for pictures. Everyone else, Judge Thomas and his family invite you to join them for a reception in the first floor rotunda and also on the second floor balcony. We are adjourned.
Thank you, all my law clerks.
All rise.
Sorry.
Thank you.